Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bestseller Live. I'm your host, Cynthia Johnson, and I am here today with another fabulous, wonderfully creative author, Kathleen deLaski. Kathleen, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks for the nice comment already.
Absolutely. Her book, Who Needs College Anymore, coming out February 25th, 2025, honestly, I can't wait to hear more about this book. Like, Who Needs College Anymore has been kind of floating around in my head off and on for the past couple of years. A little bit about Kathleen. Kathleen is the founder and board chair of the Education Design Lab, which works with colleges, states, and employers to design shorter, more targeted forms of higher education. She serves as senior advisor for Harvard's Project on the Workforce and teaches higher ED redesign at George Mason University. She serves on several boards, including Credential Engine and the advisory board of the Taubman Center for Cities and States at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She also manages the deLaski Family Foundation, a national grant maker in education reform and education mobility. Kathleen is clearly well-versed in this topic. Welcome, Kathleen. So excited to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm curious to learn why you've been thinking about this topic for a while, because everybody has their own story, right?
Yeah, yes. And we can get to that in the interview. I'm sure it will come up. I recently, I have a 7-month-old and a 3-year-old and millennial. So I went through the whole college, take loans, don't take loans. Everybody owes money. Nobody owes money. So the topic is definitely highlighted in my life. But I'm curious, when did you enter this space? Like, when was education reform, if that's correct, highlighted for you?
Well, it actually hit me, I would say, when my own children were going through middle school and high school. I had a very sunny, wonderful, traditional 20th century experience with higher education back when it was inexpensive. And I applied to one college and got in. And researching the book, when I went back and looked at whether I would get into that college today, I did like one of those AI search agents. It's Duke University. That's the only school I applied to. It told me that, the AI agent said I would have a 3% chance of getting into Duke today. So I don't think when my kids were going through, and my kids went through middle school and high school, like in the 2000s, around the time of the Great Recession, and they were totally the way through. And we live in an area that is very, that's a pressure cooker. It's the DC area where everybody has like even a graduate degree and a postdoc. It's a highly educated area, and you're expected to go to college. And they were really struggling, both of them. One of them ended up going to college, one did not. But I was made to feel like an outsider, very much, because, I was constantly being like called to the principal's office. And, one of my kids got, asked to leave, 3 different high schools. She had, at that time, undiagnosed. She was on the, autism spectrum, and we didn't know to call it that at the time. But highly intelligent. So, you don't think, oh, let's look for a different path. But, so many people have a story like that. And then when I got, I became a journalist for the first half of my career. And then, it came after, working at AOL as a product developer and, learning about what users want online and how, the early days of online learning. And then from there, I went into education reform, starting at Sallie Mae at the, which was the education finance leader at the time, and then left Sallie Mae to really go to first work in the charter school environment, because I was very motivated by like this idea that your zip code defines how prepared you will be for college, because it defines how good of an education you'll get in K-12. And it felt like such an unfair situation for many sectors of America. And so I worked on K-12, but then it really hit me, after 8 to 10 years of doing that we were making gains in helping these students get to college, and that was the goal: college access, college for all. But what we didn't have the data then, that they were not, many of them, like half of them, were not succeeding on the other side. And in fact, their lives were often, they were worse off by having gone that route. And me and a lot of other people I knew who were in K-12 education reform actually crossed over to work in this space of, okay, what comes after high school, and why does it have to be a 4-year degree? Because only 38% of American adults hold a 4-year degree, and we never talk about the other, the majority, the 62% who don't. We never talk about what they're going to do, except for maybe trade school. And so I've spent the last 12 or 13 years, starting this organization, the Education Design Lab, and working towards helping colleges from the inside think about, wait, we need more constructs than the 4-year degree, because that setting it up for a college or bust environment for all of our learners is really kind of beginning to hold us back, particularly because it's become so expensive. And let's face it, this next generation is a little more, I don't want to say fragile, but they have a different set of priorities about how much time they want to spend sitting at a desk. And it's contributing to the mental health crisis, to be honest.
Everything that you're explaining makes complete sense. I've never, as someone who went through that same process, I remember being removed from college classes because the teacher went off on a tangent, and I politely said, I don't believe that's what we're paying you for.
That sounds like something my daughter would get to class for. Exactly.
Can we get back on track here?
Yeah.
And I was removed from the class, and I thought, well, that's strange. Like it didn't really register why this, because in every other aspect of my life, so you pay somebody and then they do a job, and
right, that they don't do it, you get somebody else.
They don't do it, exactly. And that it sounds like what you're describing a little bit is, especially with this next generation, and I run a company, I see what you're talking about. If you can do in 4 hours what someone else does in 8, why do you have to be there 8 hours?
Right.
So in the book, how are you really thinking about or framing this? Like, what's the big idea?
So I use a methodology of human-centered design to research and frame the book. And if some of your listeners are not familiar with human-centered design, is basically where you think about innovation through the eyes of the end user, and you start with them and their needs that are not getting met, and you work on design starting from kind of the center of the end user. And so the book is organized by those stakeholders, by users, right? So there are chapters on families, there are chapters on how high schools are preparing people, and how that's changing at the front lines of when people say, am I going to go to college? And so you go to the front lines and meet some of those folks who may be looking for other choices, but do they have other choices? And then we look at colleges themselves, and how the value proposition is beginning to change. The demands of the end users are that, hey, we want you to prepare us for good jobs. And we look at, are they actually preparing you for entry into the workforce, or are they giving you a broad brush degree from their point of view? And so we look at who's innovating in that regard. And then we look at employers and what workarounds are employers using, particularly in fields where they are desperate for talent pipeline. Because I say in the book that is going to be the future for many industries. With we're going to get to net immigration, zero population growth with net of immigration by like 2043 maybe. And so worker shortages, particularly in the skilled level, are going to be very real. And so employers who already are seeing those issues are finding workarounds. And what are they? and we can come back to what those are, but the big idea in the book is we need more constructs of, college. I'm using air quotes here on the podcast. College should be defined as several different paths, quality paths to adultification or skilling up later in life. It doesn't have to be when you're 18. And there are many other ways to think about those adultification or skill up pathways that are not currently don't qualify as a degree, and therefore they don't qualify for federal financial aid. You have to pay out of your own pocket. They're not well advertised. They're not evaluated, and you just don't even know. In high school, and you're like, oh, I don't think I want to do the 4-year degree, or I don't think I want to put my parents through that financial gauntlet.
Mm. In the book, are you suggesting, because it sounds like there's really three, maybe as I'm hearing this, three types of people who would read it. I'm going to go to college, maybe. I have a child who's going to go to college, maybe. And should I be looking at colleges for my workforce, or maybe becoming an educator myself to get the workforce? So, I mean, who did you really write the book for?
I would say two groups were really weighing on, each shoulder. One was the unsung, what I call entrepreneurs inside of colleges, who are trying to do exactly what I'm describing, and the system isn't helping them. Either they don't have leadership at their college or community college, or they don't. They're bound by things like having to get faculty approval or accreditation, which takes 3 years to get like a new program. The term things they want to do don't qualify for federal financial aid. So one of my audiences was people inside, practitioners who were trying to make inroads into expanding the definition of college. And my second, was really all the people who come up to me when they hear what I do and say, "Oh, I have a 2-year-old. Are they going to need college?" I had a lawyer that I was working with on something else said, "Oh, when you have time, could we talk about my son who's 17? And I don't think college is the right path, but I don't know what to suggest to him, and I don't want him to feel like nothing." Those are the two audiences that I kind of wrote the book for.
Yeah, it's like that question of you don't want to give poor advice. If everyone's sending their kids to college, you feel like pressured, like, well, that's what I have to do. But on the other hand, you're questioning it yourself. You're like, wait,
yeah. And I think the kind of the next level down folks who I think could find interest in big pieces of the book would be employers who are thinking. In fact, I'm writing a piece right now for a publication called CEO World, and I'm trying to get in the head of what does the CEO audience need from this book. And I think it's really about understanding the movements, the sort of the different trends that are conspiring to constrict the skilled workforce that they're looking for. Apparently, HBR, Harvard Business Review, recently published a piece which said that 80% of CEOs said that this is their biggest concern, which is building a pipeline capacity of their workforce, and so thinking about building their pipelines differently than sending their team to a college fair, or I know that like the consulting firms used to only recruit at the top colleges, and they would only recruit people who had a 4.0, and that was their hiring strategy, right? And I think at many levels, employers are getting smarter about, okay, pipeline looks different. How do we create a what I call a skills genome, basically a map of skills for each job role within an industry, like employers have to get together and create those maps to create more visibility into those pathways, so they can, learners can find them, and they can find, potential employees. That's got to get, I mean, AI is ready to assist in this, but the data is not there.
And the data is not there.
The data is not there. We don't have, right. Like AI is fabulous, but it needs data sets, right? And there in many fields, I mean, there are a few exceptions we could talk about, but in many fields, we don't have the, okay, for entry level role, to be, a cloud engineer, first level, you need this skill, and this skill. That's not necessarily, I mean, it actually in cloud computing, it sort of is. They have kind of come together. But in many fields, it's not clear what the combined skill set is that you need for entry level. If we had those, or even then for the next level, I mean, my organization, which is, nonprofit, education nonprofit, we preach this, and yet we ourselves don't have very accurate, what they call competency maps, or pathways that help people understand, okay, if I'm an education designer one, like what would it take to get that job? And then what does it take to get to education designer level 2? Nobody knows. A few fields like cybersecurity and certain ones in advanced manufacturing have out of desperation for talent, workforces have developed those. So I do think employers will find motivation and this idea that they need to work across silos with colleges, and sort of how to do that, where the entry points are, I think could be helpful.
Yeah, I guess, but in either level, I mean, any level, there's this human element to it.
Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting, when you say like who needs college anymore, because often what I've seen is the relational, oh, I went there, or, you even see on LinkedIn, they're telling you to apply to things because the person who most, like 10% of people went to the same school as you, or are there other identifier, like, are there ways to break those relational barriers quickly if college changes, I guess,
Yeah, and I think part of what you're getting at is like, what do we give up if people aren't going to college? And there's so much, nostalgia on the point, from the point of view of previous generations who have been to college. The idea that you go to college and you make lifelong bonds with friends, and you get excellent contacts from potentially professors. You get pulled into a network potentially in your field where, internships are made known to you. You might have a football team that you're excited about, or be on the cheer squad. I mean, I teach at a large public university. I see, the benefits for my students of what they get to do because they're in this community. And I think about, okay, well, gosh, I just want to take that away. So I'm very pro college, and that probably the biggest reason I'm pro college is for those intangibles that help, that college offers, that if we're all just using a just-in-time learning modality to get this skill even from this boot camp or this online Google certificate, we even an apprenticeship, which is more like workforce focused, we're not having that wonderful coming of age experience that most people that I'm having this conversation with did get to have, right? And largely we have to have this conversation because we've priced ourselves, we've priced most of them, not most, but a good majority of Americans out of the market, right? I mean, my college cost, well, I can't remember what my university cost, but I went to one of Harvard's graduate schools. I went to the Kennedy School of Government, and I had to pay for it myself. So I remember very, very much what it cost. It was $6,000 a year. And it was in the early 80s. And I could make that happen as a 22-year-old by myself, who can do that now? I mean, I'm affiliated with Harvard, and I would say that the Kennedy School, so many now of the applicants are from overseas because Americans are not applying for the John F. Kennedy School of Government because it's too expensive.
It's just college change. Like, does that, I guess the expectation have to change if we enter this AI world, we know all this stuff. Like, we know everything. Like, I can tell you things I don't understand in it, but I can tell you all about them. And I don't understand a word of it. So if the knowledge base is widely acceptable, what role does college play?
Yeah. I think what I try to push people to think about is, if you've got AI on the side as your guide, either the professor, what you need to do in a college environment is interact with the information. I teach design thinking, and it's supposed to stand in for one of the general education requirements in the honors college. That's where I teach, and and I get very excited about how Gen Z is interacting, because I'm encouraging them to use AI, bring it to the table, and we're coming up with. We're doing user research. We're coming up with ideation and prototypes, and we're testing them with people. So, it requires them to be active with people and collaborate with each other and use critical thinking skills. So, because we're not, it's not, and more colleges are doing this, and that's great. It's not rote anymore in the sense that you're just being asked to spit out facts on a test. I see very few folks doing that, except if they have to get through a first round engineering or chemistry class, right? So I do think that higher ed is embracing AI to kind of take the learning it can open up to you to the next level of like interacting with it. But I think, to come back to what we lose, if fewer people feel they can afford college or feel that it's relevant enough for them because they can just look up the thing. I think the products that I'm talking about that we need to have, on the college website are like portions of it, like how like design thinking is a great example, or having cohort, like shorter term cohorts where you could get like what might have been a study experience, that you get a affordable short-term version of the college experience part of college that you can sign up for like a semester, as opposed to, oh, we'll give it to you in the 4 years, but you've got to pay for 4 years. That's the packaging problem that we have, is that people don't want to have to buy the whole product anymore. And I think colleges have to figure that out, and they have to be funded by government to be able to afford to do that. Because right now, they're only allowed to offer, certain kinds of courses. So that is, that like government and colleges have to come together to create this new set of services that are smaller in pieces and more discrete in people understanding the value proposition.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it almost sounds like the putting the experience part back into expertise, like,
Yeah.
like what are we actually, like, and you do the thing, try the thing, experience whatever it is, because the truth is, where I think AI has been really helpful, is how quickly we can understand now who actually does understand something.
Interesting.
Because information provided without context is just information, it doesn't mean anything to you. And so there's this other place. In fact, I run a personal brand development agency, and we work with a lot of people doing really big, amazing things. And I'll ask them to draw, like, what does the world look like if you're successful. And what's so interesting, it always ends up looking like a flower, like circles with lines connecting to other circles. and it is that, like, that interaction, or that embracing the actual doing of the thing and the motion of the thing, that stands out to me when you're talking to people who are becoming experts, or becoming really aiming to have a deep understanding of something. Like, everything is a motion. There's forward motion behind it.
I love that.
Yeah. And if you could go back to college all over again,
Mm-hmm.
what would you, and if so, what would you do differently, if anything?
I mean, I tell people, and I probably would have taken this advice myself if old me could go back with my knowledge to, or I had an AI agent to tell me what I know today. I say to people, if you have the money or access to the money through your family, if you have the time, meaning you don't have to take care of an aging parent or a grandmother, or you're not a single mom, I say go for it. Go for college, even despite everything I've said. And many people are at least trying. I mean, only like 40% of people don't get through the gauntlet that start. But if they haven't, I mean, I would advise people to be very careful about choosing your college in terms of what kind of debt to get into. And there are some that are better for ROI than others. I would say go for it. And I would have gone for it, even though I was just kind of swept along. I didn't even think about it at the time. But I actually did this in the late 70s when I went to college, because I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And my college, Duke, didn't have a journalism major. And I went there anyway, but I thought, oh, I'm going to have to figure out how to get experience. And so I went and worked, for free at the TV station in town. And that's how I broke into TV. But like that can't work for everyone. I mean, there are only going to be one or two interns at the TV station, right, in the college town. I definitely would do it again. I would go to college, but I'm a very particular kind of student. I don't know that one of my daughters did not go to college, and I tell her story in the book. I actually I describe sort of 4 types of people who can avoid or can sort of afford to give college a miss or skip it in this day and age, and 4 kinds of learners who really, the degree is still really kind of a. And one of the people I profile in the Who Can Afford to Skip College, I think, is my own daughter, who after she was a ballet dancer and still is a ballet dancer, but they go straight to apprenticeship at 18. She really was upset about not going to college because she was the only person from her high school who didn't go to college, and it was very otherizing for her. But after like 4 years, she got over it, because once they were all out of college, all the friends, right? She was still she's still a dancer today, but her whole ballet company got laid off during COVID, and she was out. So she did one of these boot camps in digital marketing, and wow, just in one boot camp, she was able to parlay herself into pretty good work, just off of a portfolio and the contacts she made in one boot camp. So I think when you're career switching, so career switcher who's well connected, I that's one of the categories of people I say who can afford to skip college, assuming you're not trying to be a doctor or a lawyer, one of the fields where, come hell or high water, you have to have that piece of paper, right?
Yeah, that's it's such. I have a sister who didn't go to college, and I'll tell you, if you are that personality and you would go to college to make money, she certainly didn't have to. You know what I mean? It was like, and she has no excess of like things in her life. She was like, well, that's not gonna make money, so I'm not gonna do it. It's like,
yeah.
So I hear those. I love that you're looking at it from the different personalities too, because it's so clear that someone who's going to thrive in college sometimes and someone who's not. This is wonderful. I'm so excited for your book, and I'm so excited for everyone watching to get a copy. I know pre-order is available now, and the book will be officially published February 25th, 2025. Beautiful day. And for all of those listening, paying attention, can you let us know where we can find you, and can we reach out? And if so, where?
Absolutely. Yes. I've created a website for the book with the same name called Who Needs College Anymore, all one word, .org. And there's a contact page on there if you're interested in, me coming and helping you stir up some good trouble, innovation trouble in your locale. There also will be discussion guides, by sort of by sets of the stakeholders I mentioned for people who want to have their own conversations. So that's probably the best way to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn and we're sort of on Twitter.
Amazing. Thank you so much again for being here. And for all of you who are watching, this will be included in our newsletter and also, of course, always in the show notes. We'll be back next week with another episode of Bestseller Live. Thank you so much for being here, Kathleen, and thank you for joining us and watching, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.